In the previous episode, we saw that when no one was home, an intruder in an alpha body came to get information about Leping and Elizabeth, but as he entered the house, he was shocked to see a chaotic scene. Up next, tiles began bouncing one after another across the blue-tiled floor. Each time one of them jumped, the tile it passed over vanished into thin air. It was as if some mysterious force was erasing everything in its path. A strange marble-like creature appeared, laughing mischievously as it moved. It followed a clear rule. Anything it jumped over simply disappeared. This was the power of checkers, a rule where every piece that got leapt over would cease to exist. The marble continued its motion, smashing through everything with unstoppable energy. Amidst the chaos and scattering debris, a tall and regal figure emerged from the glowing mist. Holding a long black sword and wearing a crown, she stood with calm authority. Her cold eyes revealed no emotion. She was known as the Chess Queen. She gripped her sword tightly and smashed the marble. However, just then, a powerful cannon fired, and the cannonball shot forward with great force. It crashed straight toward the towering Chess Queen, causing a huge explosion. The impact sent shockwaves across the battlefield, shaking the ground and filling the air with smoke and debris. From a distance, Alpha stood frozen, watching the chaos unfold. The sudden blast made him frown in confusion. He couldn't understand what was happening in front of him. Beside him, Wang Kai turned with glowing eyes and began to explain. It said that this was the annual competition known as the Best of the Indoors. Wang Kai added that the scene before them was an internal battle to decide who would earn a place on the chess team. He also explained the rules. It said that in this competition arena, which it had created, all the players could freely use their powers and fight as much as they wanted. No one needed to hold back. It said that no matter what happened, whether something was destroyed or fell off the field, it would be restored to its original place afterward, completely unharmed. Then, a bright light appeared above Alpha, forming symbols that announced the chess team representative. It was clear that this fight determined who would earn that title. Alpha stood below, listening to the explanation. Still trying to understand the situation, he asked in disbelief if all this chaos was just to fight for one spot in the tournament. He then wondered aloud who might be competing in the other divisions. Wang Chai floated beside him and spoke in a slightly annoyed tone. It said Alpha had been acting strange lately and seemed forgetful, and it didn't want to explain everything again, so it told him to see for himself. As Wang Chai opened a compartment on its body, a small mechanical arm extended and pulled out a device, a camera. The lens glowed as it activated, projecting a beam of blue light onto the space ahead. The narration revealed that it was a DV camera created by Leping, later upgraded and remodeled by Wang. Before Alpha's eyes, a huge holographic display appeared in the air, showing a tournament bracket filled with glowing names. Alpha stood silently, staring up at the projection, finally ready to see who the other competitors were. As the holographic display expanded, different group names began to appear: Plant Group, Tool Set, Toy Set, Chemical Group, and Battery Pack. Alpha's eyes widened in shock as he stared at the glowing chart. He realized that the people currently fighting were only a small part of the entire force. It was just the tip of the iceberg compared to the total power behind it. He felt uneasy, realizing this was information he had never known before. It made him understand that he had completely underestimated the true strength of the man once known as G.I. Joe. Just then, the camera's lens flickered with a bright light, and a voice came from it. Wang Chai calmly told him not to be nervous. A place had already been reserved for him. Alpha pointed at the display, surprised, and asked if he was really part of it. Wang Chai nodded proudly, explaining that as the organizer, it had full authority. It mentioned how Alpha had been busy lately, helping with many tasks. With a cheerful tone, it suggested they have some fun together so he could blend in better with everyone. Curious, Alpha asked what the winner would receive. With a confident tone, Wang Chai replied that the victor would earn the highest position in the family, the supreme leader's role. Alpha looked surprised and asked if that meant controlling all the troops. As he pondered this, a glowing red system panel appeared before him, explaining the rewards. It stated that if he chose to participate in the tournament, he would receive 3 powerful super gems as a bonus from the system. It encouraged Alpha to join, calling it a great opportunity to strike at the enemy's base. Reading the details, Alpha was astonished. He couldn't believe such valuable gems were being offered as prizes, and wondered how the system could be so generous. Just then, another message appeared, instructing him to follow the system's guidance. With the power of the big gem, victory would be almost certain. It urged him to win the tournament, wait for his enemies, the man and the Demon King, to return, and then defeat them both in one move. The system's tone carried a sense of vengeance, as if it wanted to settle an old score. Alpha turned to his original Alpha soul and asked what he thought about the other contestants, how strong they might be. Original Alpha looked uncertain and replied that he wasn't sure yet. As he stood there thinking, Wang Chai beside him interrupted impatiently. It told him to stop mumbling to himself and quickly decide whether he wanted to join the tournament or not. The chess team's match would be ending soon. Wang Chai's face lit up like a countdown clock, and the glowing digits began to tick down. Alpha watched nervously as the numbers reached 0. Then, with a loud explosion, the words, "Time's up," appeared in the air. A powerful shockwave burst across the arena, shaking the ground and filling the space with smoke and light. Alpha covered his face, stunned by the sudden blast. As the dust cleared, shadowy figures began to appear. A pilot with goggles, a stern man with long hair, and a heavily armored warrior holding a spear. Their glowing eyes and strong presence showed they were powerful competitors. Wang Chai looked up and announced in its mechanical voice that, based on the battle point statistics, the chess division had earned a place in the upcoming competition. With excitement, it raised a red banner high above its head. The word chess shone brightly across it. Confetti filled the air as colorful lights surrounded the stage. Soon, the members of the chess division appeared one by one. A cheerful king with a golden crown smiled proudly, while beside him stood a graceful queen dressed in shining armor and a long blue cape. Knights and pawns celebrated together, cheering with joy as the crowd erupted in applause. The entire team stood tall and proud, ready to face the battles ahead. After the winner was announced, a bright blue light filled the room as swirling energy began to move around, creating a strange distortion in the air. In an instant, the entire space trembled. When the light faded, Alpha and Wang Kai found themselves sitting on the floor, surrounded by glowing energy lines. Alpha sighed, realizing the situation was more complicated than he had expected. The information he received wasn't completely accurate, but he thought it was still better to secure the position through a tournament than fight directly. Confident in his own strength, he reminded himself that he was at least a 4-star demon king. With the system's great jewel on his side, there was no way he could lose. Determined, he clenched his fist and said firmly that he would join the competition. Just then, Wang Chai turned towards the elemental goblins and told them that he would let them participate too, but reminded them this wasn't going to be a team battle. Just as he spoke, several small glowing figures appeared before him, each one shining in a different color. There was one made of fire, one of water, one of earth, one of wind, and one of light. Surprised, Alpha blinked and stared at them. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. He muttered to himself, wondering if these could be the long-lost elemental goblins from legend. Meanwhile, Wang Chai floated closer and spoke up, reminding the group that they needed to choose a representative quickly. It warned that if they didn't, they would be disqualified from the competition. The 5 elemental goblins stood together, glowing with different colors. One of them stepped forward and told Boss Wang not to worry. With confidence, it explained that they would combine their powers and merge into a single being. The blue goblin, wearing cool shades, looked up and asked if merging would break any rules. It seemed proud of the idea and waited for approval. Alpha raised an eyebrow, clearly curious. Then Wang Chai told them that since they weren't machines, he wanted to see how they would actually merge. If they could really do it, he would allow them to take part in the tournament. With a sly grin, the blue goblin adjusted its sunglasses and replied playfully that Boss Wang should be ready, because what was about to happen might surprise him. The elemental goblins began their strange ritual. The wind spirit grabbed the earth goblin by the head, lifting it up, while the water spirit pulled the fiery one closer, trying to calm its temper. Then, a bright light burst out from the center as all 5 of them started to shine. Their colors mixed, blue, red, yellow, brown, and light, creating a blinding glow. The air shook with power as they began to merge. Alpha stepped back in shock, staring at the dazzling fusion. He couldn't believe his eyes. How can different elements merge into one? That's completely against the laws of magic, he thought, his face full of disbelief. As the light dimmed, the 5 goblins stood together in a new formation, glowing with power. The wind spirit raised its arm proudly and declared with confidence. Seeing this, Alpha looked completely speechless. His face twisted in confusion as he tried to make sense of what he had just seen. The elemental goblins stood proudly, glowing brightly together, while Wang Chai cheerfully declared that they had passed the test. but Alpha couldn't hold back his frustration. He pointed at them and shouted, saying it still looked like 5 separate goblins instead of 1. No matter how he looked at it, nothing had changed. However, Wang Chai ignored his complaint, smiling proudly as if everything was fine. Alpha sighed in defeat and grumbled, deciding it wasn't worth arguing anymore. Fine, he thought bitterly. I'll just take care of them once the game starts. At that moment, a glowing red system window appeared in front of him. It displayed a new mission, new side quest added, catch the elemental goblins and upgrade your magic during the game. Bonus, complete the full elemental magic series. Alpha stared at it helplessly, realizing his day had just gotten a lot more troublesome. After that, Wang Chai moved toward a whiteboard, holding the marker with its mechanical arm. It began writing down the names of different groups participating in the competition. On the board games group was labeled chess, while the elemental group included all participants. The home appliance group and plant group were still undecided, and the monster group had forfeit written next to it. Lastly, the temp worker group was labeled alpha. As Wang Chai continued to explain, it mentioned that the little frog from the monster group had failed its advancement and was forced to reincarnate. Because of that, the monster group had no choice but to forfeit, leaving an empty spot on the list. It sighed lightly and turned toward the room full of appliances. Forget it, it said. Let's deal with the other groups first. Has the home appliance group decided who to send for the competition? A fan and a vacuum cleaner nearby seemed to react, spinning and humming slightly as if ready to volunteer. As Wang Chai asked which appliance would compete, the round cleaning robot on the floor suddenly began beeping and speaking in rapid streams of binary code. The room filled with strange robotic sounds, ones only machines could understand. Alpha stood there, completely lost. He frowned and asked the system what the cleaning robot was trying to say. A glowing red message window appeared in front of him telling him, decoding, unable to interpret algorithm, decryption failed. Alpha sighed, feeling helpless. Clearly, whatever the machines were saying was far beyond his understanding. Meanwhile, Wang Chai quickly stepped in to smooth things over. All right, it said calmly. Since everyone seems to have reached an agreement, let's finalize it this way. Moments later, the television in the room flickered to life. 2 glowing eyes appeared on the screen. The home appliance group chose television as their representative in this competition. Just then, a knock came from the door, and Wang Chai turned toward it with a cheerful tone. Come in, perfect timing, it said happily. The door opened wide, and a group of plant creatures walked in. Leading them was an old radish spirit wearing traditional robes, the soul of the radish, a saint rank being with 2 stars. He bowed slightly and greeted Butler Wang Chai, we're here. Wang Chai welcomed them warmly and asked, Grandpa Radish, has your plant group decided who will take part in the competition? Meanwhile, Alpha looked at the scene, his expression filled with disbelief. His system tried once again to decode the strange energy coming from the plant beings, but another red warning message appeared. System fail again. Decoding. Unable to interpret. Decryption failed. Alpha sighed and muttered under his breath. What a strange bunch. Why are these plant monsters even getting involved? When Alpha made fun of them, calling them a bunch of misfits, the old radish elder calmly raised his hand. He told everyone not to rush and said he would first introduce the members of the plant group. He began with a serious tone. The first one he introduced was Professor Tomato, a strict and meticulous member known for his harshness. Then came little brother Eggplant, who was adorable yet full of strength. Next was Cousin Corn, a flashy and fashionable member who always followed the latest trends. The elder warned that if anyone called him old-fashioned, he would lose his temper immediately. After that, he introduced Mr. Banana, a calm and mysterious figure who always kept things to himself. Finally, he introduced Uncle Green Pepper, calling him the strange one of the group. Green Pepper immediately protested, shouting in frustration and asking why his introduction had to sound so weird. The old radish elder continued proudly, listing one plant member after another without stopping. He introduced Miss White Fungus, Little Sister Strawberry, Aunt Mushroom, Master Bitter Melon, and the charming Granny Red Date. Then came Old Lady Pomegranate, Taro the Watermelon, Baby Bean Sprout, Uncle Sugarcane, and Captain Wintermelon. As the introductions went on and on, Alpha's eyes began to spin. His face turned pale, and soon he collapsed to the floor, overwhelmed by the endless list of names. Even after an hour had passed, the old radish was still talking, naming more members like Third Great Uncle Garlic, Cousin Melon Auntie, Pineapple Ronin, Cherry Idol, and Bamboo Shoot Taoist. When he finally finished, he clapped his hands together and smiled with relief, saying calmly that the introductions were now complete. After listening for what felt like forever, Wang Chai finally spoke with dizzy eyes, asking who the plant group had decided to send for the competition. The old radish elder calmly replied that there was no need to hurry. He explained that he had only finished introducing one household, and under the creator's care, there were still many new hybrid plants waiting to be mentioned. Hearing this, Alpha, still lying on the floor, jolted in shock, while Wang Chai quickly raised its arm and shouted for him to stop. Trying to stay polite, Wang Chai said that Grandpa Radish truly had an impressive voice, but they were running out of time. It decided to move things forward and announce the plant group's representative for the contest. Upon hearing this, everyone pointed toward a small green plant and shouted that P. Rookie would be the one to represent them. P. Rookie looked confused, blinking in surprise. He couldn't believe it. Was he really going to fight? Upon hearing this, Wang Chai turned to the old radish and politely asked him to return to the fields and rest. It promised to summon everyone once the competition began. However, Grandpa Radish wasn't ready to leave just yet. With a shy blush, he began to talk about how he had recently fallen in love. He described how, in a pot of radish and red date stewed pork, he had met someone so enchanting. Her wrinkled and sagging charm had completely won his heart. Before he could finish his story, the robot quickly shut the door on him with a loud slam, ending the awkward conversation immediately. After shutting the door, Wang Chai let out a sigh of relief. It was finally over. Grandpa Radish had been sent away. He muttered that without the special noise-canceling headset made by its master, even it could barely handle Grandpa Radish's endless nagging and loud voice. Just then, Alpha behind it spoke, still shaken. He asked if those strange beings were really just plant monsters. He almost had a mental breakdown trying to keep up with them, even though he was supposed to be a brave hero. Just then, a system message appeared before him. The system reassured him not to worry. Those creatures were nothing more than regular monsters. It told him to trust himself, reminding him that every monster was just an experience pack for the hero. But Alpha hesitated, starting to speak. Before he could finish, another warning flashed. Do not question the system. The system's orders are always correct. Follow the instructions. That is the fastest way to become stronger. Seeing this, Alpha turned to the original soul of the Holy Sword beside him and asked calmly if the Holy Sword had anything to add. The original Alpha soul replied that from what he knew, those plant monsters couldn't use their full strength in the real world. He explained that the pea creature was just a normal monster Leping had brought back from the elf tribe. Then the system suddenly spoke again, insisting that it could never be wrong. It commanded the player to destroy anything created by Leping, shouting repeatedly to kill. Just then, Wang Chai suddenly announced that its upgrade was complete. However, a bright display screen appeared in front of Alpha. Seeing this, Wang Chai was shocked and asked why he had a display screen. Before Alpha could say more, a red warning appeared. The system has been exposed. Eliminate the target immediately. Alpha stared in disbelief. Wang Chai beside him looked surprised and said, no wonder he was always talking to himself. So he's been using an external cheat all along. Wang Chai explained how it had found out about the system. While fixing Grandpa Radish's word spirit attack, it had added a small backward-compatible upgrade to its language database. During that process, it discovered the hidden system. It then looked at Alpha and said that if he really wanted to get stronger, he should have just asked for help. He could have designed a far better system. It called his current cheat unimpressive and outdated. As Wang Chai spoke, the faulty system began to panic. Red warnings filled the air, flashing messages about errors and instability. The system shouted that it wasn't broken, but soon its messages turned into gibberish. Then everything crashed. Wang Chai watched calmly as the display glitched. Once things settled, it mentioned that only the Tools group hadn't joined the competition yet. None of them wanted to participate, so it asked Alpha to go convince them. Feeling a bit guilty, Wang Chai admitted that it was probably its fault. The last time it fought them, it had beaten them so badly they were scared to try again. Still, it thought that if they knew their opponent might be Alpha, maybe they'd agree to join. But before it could continue, alarms suddenly went off around them. Red lights filled the air as a loud warning echoed. High energy alert! As red warning signs surrounded Alpha, the air around them grew heavy. Alpha felt an overwhelming pressure and frowned, sensing something dark. Beads of sweat rolled down his face as he muttered that the resentment was incredibly strong. A strange purple glow filled the room, and dark mist began to rise from the floor. Alpha quickly pointed forward and shouted that the source was coming from that direction. He turned toward the disturbance. His glowing eyes flashed red as they detected something powerful. He wondered aloud if this might be the legendary being the system had once mentioned, an unnameable entity from another universe. Wang Jai's readings showed dangerous energy levels, even greater than before. Both of them tensed up. In a dark room filled with swirling purple energy, a small girl sat curled up in the corner, her eyes empty and voice trembling. She muttered that her mother usually showed affection toward her father in front of her, but this time they went on a trip and left her behind. Her voice grew shaky as she whispered again and again, asking why they didn't take her. Each word carried deep pain and resentment, and the air around her became thick with dark energy. As her emotions spiraled, the resentment inside her began to overflow. She clutched her chest, gasping that her heart felt tight and suffocating. Dark shadows erupted from her body, twisting wildly as her small frame transformed. From the swirling darkness, a tall, vengeful figure emerged, her form now twisted by anger and loneliness. Holding a weapon in hand, she glared ahead, her voice filled with fury as she declared that she would take part in the battle herself. Dark energy surrounded the girl as her anger grew uncontrollable. Her voice trembled with madness as she repeated that she had to release her resentment. Each word echoed louder, filled with hatred and pain. Her eyes glowed with fury as she lifted her weapon high. In a burst of rage, she screamed that she would split the entire world in half. The power around her roared violently, shaking everything nearby. Alpha, watching her, broke into a cold sweat, staring in shock at the overwhelming force. His voice trembled as he nervously asked if it was still possible to cancel his registration. Meanwhile, far away from the chaos, Leping and Elizabeth enjoyed a peaceful moment together. With cheerful smiles, they stood by the fire in their swimsuits, sharing slices of watermelon as they relaxed on their hot spring trip.